The great ship hung in the darkness above Earth like a metal mountain. Its name was the Eternal Conquest, and it had brought death to 17 worlds before this one. Inside its command room, Ambassador Al prepared himself for the sacred duty of war declaration. Al was a creature that looked something like a giant insect mixed with a nightmare. He stood 8 feet tall on 6 legs. His body was covered in hard black shell, and his 4 arms ended in claws sharp enough to cut through metal. His head held 2 large red eyes that never blinked, and his mouth was full of parts that clicked and scraped when he spoke. He was very proud of his species. The Dominion had conquered more worlds than any other empire in the galaxy. They were efficient, they were ruthless, they were perfect. And now they had found a new world to take. Al looked at the blue and green planet below. His scouts had studied this world for 3 days. They had watched the creatures called humans very carefully. The report sat in front of him, and it made him want to laugh. The humans were soft. They had no shells, no claws, no natural weapons at all. They were slow and weak. Most strange of all, the scouts had observed them during something called the Olympic Games. The humans had gathered in large numbers to watch other humans run, jump, and throw things. This appeared to be their highest form of physical ability. Al clicked his mouth parts in amusement. These creatures thought running fast and jumping over sticks was impressive. They could move 3 times faster and jump 10 times higher. This conquest would be easy. The tradition was ancient and sacred. They always announced their wars before they began. They gave the target species 30 cycles to prepare their surrender. It was considered polite. It was also considered entertaining to watch lesser species panic. Al transported down to the planet's surface with 50 of his finest warriors. They appeared in a great hall where the humans conducted their tribal gatherings. The place was called the United Nations, and representatives from all over the planet sat in their chairs, staring at the aliens with open mouths. Al stepped forward. His translation device hung around his neck, a small machine that would convert his words into the human language. He had programmed it with what he believed was appropriate formal speech. He raised all 4 of his arms in the traditional gesture of dominance. He clicked and scraped his declaration in the tongue, and the machine spoke in human words. "Felicitations, you have announced battle against the incorrect species," the device said in a cheerful voice. "The Dominion greets the small, soft creatures of this wet world. We come to take your planet, your resources, and your lives. You have 30 of your sun cycles to prepare your complete surrender. Sincerely, we mean this. Sincerely." Al waited for the screaming to begin. He waited for the crying and the begging. This was his favorite part. Instead, the humans just stared at him. Some of them looked at each other with expressions he could not read. One human in the front row, a female with gray hair, raised her hand slowly. "I'm sorry," she said. "Did your machine say we announce battle against you? Because we definitely did not do that." Al's eyes flickered with confusion. "The translation is correct. We are announcing that you will battle us. You will lose, this is certain." "Oh," said the human. "Okay, so you're declaring war on us." "Yes, this is what I said." "Your machine said something quite different, actually." Al looked at his device with annoyance. These were minor details. The meaning was clear enough. "You have 30 cycles," he repeated. "Prepare your surrender. We will return to collect your world." He turned to leave, satisfied with his performance. Behind him, the humans had started talking to each other in urgent voices. "Good. Let them panic. Let them understand their doom." What did not see was the look that passed between the military leaders in the room. It was not a look of fear. It was something else entirely. General Sarah of the United States sat in her chair and watched the aliens disappear in a flash of light. Her heart was beating fast, but not from terror. She had spent her entire career preparing for threats. She had never imagined this particular threat, but her mind was already working. 30 days. They had 30 days. She looked at General from Russia. He nodded once. She looked at General Wei from China. Another nod. Around the room, military leaders from every nation were having the same silent conversation. The politicians were starting to panic. Someone was crying, someone else was praying, but the soldiers were already planning. Stood up and walked out of the chamber. Her phone was already in her hand, and she was making calls before she reached the door. The first call went to the president. The second went to the Pentagon. The third went to a number that officially did not exist. Within 1 hour, every military on Earth was on highest alert. Within 6 hours, enemies who had pointed missiles at each other for decades were sharing intelligence. Within 12 hours, the leaders of every major nation had agreed to work together. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting each other. They were very, very good at war. And now, for the first time in history, they had a reason to stop fighting each other and focus on something else. In orbit above Earth, Al reported to High Commander that the declaration had been delivered successfully. "How did they react?" asked. "They seemed confused," Al admitted. "I believe they are too primitive to fully understand what is happening to them." Made a clicking sound of approval. "Good. Another easy conquest. We will add their world to our territory and their bodies to our food stores." Neither of them could see what was happening on the planet below. They could not see the factories that were starting emergency production. They could not see the submarines rising from the ocean depths. They could not see the satellite weapons that were being activated for the first time in 20 years. And they certainly could not see General opening a file marked with the words, "Do not open unless ALINS." She read the first page, then she read it again. Then she smiled. 30 days that had given them. Humanity would make every second count. High Commander stood in the observation room of the Eternal Conquest and watched the blue planet turn slowly below. He had conquered 11 worlds himself, and this would be his 12th. It was almost boring at this point. His tactical officer, a younger named, approached with a data tablet. "Commander, I have completed the full analysis of the human species." "Tell me about them." Did not look away from the window. Cleared his throat, a wet clicking sound. "They are warm-blooded mammals. They stand on 2 legs and have 2 arms. Their bodies are covered in soft skin with no protective shell. They cannot survive in vacuum, extreme cold, or extreme heat. They require constant supplies of water and organic food." "Weaknesses upon weaknesses," observed. "Yes, Commander. They also have no hive mind. Each human operates as an individual unit with its own thoughts and desires." This made turn around. No hive mind. How do they coordinate their activities? "They use verbal communication, sound waves created by their mouths, and small electronic devices that send messages to each other." Made a sound of disbelief. "That is incredibly slow and inefficient. How did they ever develop technology?" "It is a mystery, Commander. However, their technology is quite primitive by our standards. Their weapons use chemical explosions to propel small pieces of metal. Their ships cannot travel faster than light without special gates. They have no plasma weapons, no shield technology, and no orbital defense systems." "Then this will be even easier than I thought." Felt a moment of disappointment. Easy conquests were less glorious. "There is one other thing, Commander. They appear to spend a significant amount of their resources on something called cat videos." "What is a cat video?" Brought up an image on his tablet. It showed a small furry creature playing with a piece of string while humans made sounds of approval. Stared at it for a long moment. This is what they do with their technology. They watch small animals play with string. "Yes, Commander. Billions of hours are spent on this activity every year. This species is not even worth conquering." Turned back to the window. "But we will take their resources. Their planet is rich in metals and water. Begin preparing the fleet for the attack in 30 cycles." What did not know What he could not possibly know was that humans had another side. The scouts had watched Earth for exactly 3 days, and those 3 days happened to be during a celebration of peace and sport. The scouts had seen humans at play. They had not seen humans at war. Down on Earth, humanity was very much at war. The enemy had given them 30 days, and they were not wasting a single one. General stood in a room buried deep underground. Around her were screens showing military installations all over the world. Factories were running 24 hours a day. Scientists were working without sleep. Soldiers were training for a kind of combat they had never imagined. "Status report," she ordered. Colonel James stepped forward. He was in charge of special weapons development. "The satellites are almost ready. We had them in storage for 20 years, waiting for the budget to deploy them. Now we have all the budget we need." "How many?" 47 satellites. Each one can fire a metal rod at 10 kilometers per second. The rods are made of tungsten. When they hit a target, they release as much energy as a small nuclear bomb, but with no radiation. Nodded. "What about the missiles?" Another officer spoke up. "We've converted 300 nuclear warheads into space-capable weapons. We've also done something new." She hesitated. "We attached fusion drives to them." "Explain." "Normally, missiles travel at maybe 20 kilometers per second at most. These new missiles can accelerate to 200 kilometers per second. The enemy won't have time to react." Allowed herself a small smile. "What about ground defense?" General, the Russian commander, stepped forward. "We have activated every military base on the planet, every tank, every aircraft, every soldier. We have also opened the special archives." Special archives. During the Cold War, both our countries developed many weapons that were too terrible to use. Biological weapons, chemical weapons, things that should never exist. His face was grim. "We have decided that if aliens try to eat our planet, we will use these weapons. We have nothing to lose." The room was quiet. Everyone understood what this meant. Humanity was preparing to fight with everything it had, including things it had promised never to use. Looked at the screens around her. She saw factories building new weapons. She saw scientists working on shield technology they had reverse-engineered from crashed UFOs. She saw soldiers learning how to fight in space suits. Most importantly, she saw something that had never happened before in human history. Every nation on Earth was working together. Old enemies were sharing secrets. Countries that had threatened each other for decades were now planning together. The aliens had made a mistake. They thought dividing humans into separate nations made them weak. They did not understand that humans knew how to unite when they faced a common enemy. They had done it before, in world wars that killed millions. Now they were doing it again, and this time there would be no holding back. On day 15, received a message from DARPA, the military research agency. "The special project is ready for testing." She flew to a secret base in Nevada. In a hangar that officially did not exist, she saw what human scientists had built in just 2 weeks. It was a suit of armor, but it was like nothing that had ever existed before. Made of materials that had been developed in secret for decades, it could survive in space, resist plasma fire, and enhance the strength of whoever wore it by a factor of 10. "We call it the walking nightmare," the lead scientist explained. "We have 200 of them ready. We can make more." "Touch the cold metal. Will it work?" "We designed it to fight aliens. We just never thought we would actually need it." She looked at the suit for a long moment. Then she looked at the scientist. "Make 500 more. We have 15 days." In orbit, continued to watch cat videos, trying to understand his future slaves. He found them confusing and stupid. He had no idea that below him, those same stupid creatures were building the weapons that would destroy his fleet. They had conquered 17 worlds. Every species they had encountered had surrendered or been easily defeated. They had no experience with a species that refused to give up. They had no experience with humanity. They were about to learn. The fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 427 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. It was called the consumption formation, and it was designed to surround a planet completely. No escape, no hope, no mercy. High Commander stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest and looked at his fleet with pride. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering. Plasma cannons that could melt cities, shield generators that could stop any known weapon, engines that could outrun anything in the galaxy. They had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same. The target species would see the fleet. They would panic. They would send desperate messages begging for mercy. Then they would land and the harvesting would begin. Open communications with the planet, ordered. Let them see their doom. The communication officer worked his controls. Channel open, Commander. Prepared to deliver his victory speech. But before he could speak, something strange happened. The communication screen showed only darkness. No terrified leaders. No crying populations. Just silence. "Is the channel working?" he demanded. "Yes, Commander. They are receiving our signal. They are simply not responding." Felt the first small touch of confusion. Every species responded. They always responded, even if only to beg. "Scan the planet. Show me their military positions." The tactical display flickered to life. What saw made no sense. The planet below was quiet. Cities were intact. There were no masses of refugees fleeing to the mountains. Everything looked normal. "Where are their armies?" "We are detecting no movement, Commander. All their military forces appear to be in normal positions, almost as if." "As if what?" "As if they are waiting for us." Made a clicking sound of annoyance. "They are probably too stupid to understand what is happening. Begin the attack. Destroy their largest cities first. That usually makes them cooperative." The fleet began to move toward Earth. 100 ships broke formation to begin the bombardment. They descended toward the planet's atmosphere, their plasma cannons charging. Then the sky around them filled with light. From all over Earth's surface, missiles launched. Thousands of them. They rose on pillars of fire that turned night into day. They climbed through the atmosphere faster than any weapon they had ever seen. "What are those?" demanded. "Unknown weapons, Commander. Primitive rocket propulsion but impossible acceleration. They are moving at 200 kilometers per second and still accelerating." 200, that is impossible. No rocket can. The first missile struck a destroyer. The nuclear warhead detonated against its hull. They had never encountered nuclear weapons. Their species had discovered atomic energy long ago, but they had immediately banned its use in weapons. It was too unstable, too dangerous, too destructive. Only a mad species would put atomic fire in a bomb. Humans had done exactly that, and then they had made the bombs bigger, and bigger, and bigger still. For 80 years they had been building weapons designed to destroy themselves. Now those weapons had a new target. The destroyer vanished in a ball of fire hotter than the sun. The ships near it tumbled away, their hulls melted and twisted. Before anyone could react, more missiles struck. 5 ships. 10. 20. "Shields!" screamed. "Raise all shields!" The fleet scrambled to activate their defensive systems. Plasma shields flickered to life around the surviving ships. The next wave of missiles struck the shields and exploded harmlessly. Allowed himself a breath of relief. The shields were holding. The primitives had surprised him, but now. "Commander, new contacts coming from above." He looked up at the tactical display. Small objects were falling from high orbit, not missiles, something else, moving at incredible speed, far faster than anything that size should move. "What are those?" "Metal rods, Commander, simple metal rods, but they are moving at 10 kilometers per second." Metal rods. What kind of weapon is a metal rod? He found out 3 seconds later. The first projectile hit a cruiser amidships. It was just a bar of tungsten, 2 meters long with no explosive at all. But it was moving so fast that when it hit, it released more energy than a nuclear bomb. The cruiser did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. The satellites continued firing. 47 satellites, each one launching rod after rod at the fleet. The ships tried to dodge, but the projectiles moved too fast. They tried to shoot them down, but the rods were too small to target. In 5 minutes, another 40 ships were destroyed. "Fall back," ordered. "All ships fall back to defensive formation around the Eternal Conquest." The fleet retreated in chaos. Ships that had never known fear were running. Officers who had conquered worlds were screaming in panic. The plasma shields could stop nuclear missiles, but they could not stop solid metal moving at speeds. Finally, the surviving ships gathered around the command carrier. Their shields overlapped, creating a defensive barrier. The projectiles struck the combined shields and were deflected. The missiles could not penetrate either. Counted his losses: 187 ships destroyed, almost half his fleet gone in less than 10 minutes. He stood in the middle of his bridge, his 4 arms trembling. This was not possible. Primitive species did not fight like this. They did not have weapons like this. They were supposed to be weak and stupid and easy to kill. "Commander," his tactical officer said quietly, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet." "Put it through." The screen flickered. A human female appeared. She had gray hair and cold eyes, and she was wearing a military uniform. Recognized her from the War Declaration ceremony. This was General. "High Commander," she said. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I believe you have made a mistake." "You dare speak to me?" Voice was filled with rage. "You have destroyed my ships. You will pay for this with your entire species." "Perhaps," replied, "but I wanted to give you a chance to reconsider. What you have seen so far is only a small part of what we can do. We have been preparing for war for a very long time. We just never knew who the enemy would be. You are primitive creatures. You have no chance against the Dominion." Smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "High Commander, your scouts watched us for 3 days. They saw us playing games. They saw us running and jumping and swimming. They thought that was the best we could do." She leaned closer to the screen. "They were very, very wrong." The transmission ended. Stared at the empty screen. Around him, his officers waited in silence. They had never seen their commander afraid before. They had never been afraid themselves. Now they were learning what fear felt like. "Commander," the tactical officer finally spoke, "what are your orders?" Straightened his body. He was High Commander of the fleet. He had conquered 11 worlds. He would not be defeated by soft creatures who watched cat videos. "We attack," he said. "Prepare all remaining ships. We will land our troops and take this planet by force." He did not know that this decision would lead to the destruction of everything he had built. He did not know that the humans were waiting for exactly this move. And he definitely did not know about the walking nightmares. The soldiers had always been the monsters in every battle. Standing 8 feet tall on 6 powerful legs, with 4 arms ending in claws that could cut through steel, they were perfect killing machines. Their black shells could stop most weapons. Their red eyes could see in complete darkness. They felt no fear, no mercy, no doubt. For 17 conquered worlds, they had been the stuff of nightmares. Now, as they landed on Earth, they were about to meet creatures who had spent their entire existence fighting nightmares. The first landing ships touched down in a place called Texas. The area was flat and dry, with no obvious defenses. The commanders had chosen it as a perfect landing zone. 5,000 warriors poured out of the ships, ready for easy slaughter. They found nothing: empty buildings, abandoned vehicles, no humans anywhere. "Spread out," ordered Commander Al. who had delivered the original war declaration. Find the creatures and kill them. The soldiers moved forward in perfect formation. Their plasma rifles were charged and ready. Their claws were sharp and hungry. They had done this many times before. Then the ground exploded. Mines. The humans had buried thousands of mines. The explosions tore through the ranks, sending bodies flying through the air. Shells cracked. Limbs separated from bodies. Screams filled the dusty air. "Take cover," Al shouted, but there was no cover. The land was flat and open, and the explosions kept coming. Then the bullets started. From hidden positions all around the landing zone, human soldiers opened fire. They used simple weapons, just metal tubes that threw smaller pieces of metal at high speed. Primitive, crude, and absolutely devastating. The shells could stop plasma fire. They could not stop the high-powered rifle rounds that the humans used. Each bullet punched through like it was nothing. Soldiers fell by the dozens. Saw his warriors dying and felt something he had never felt before. He felt afraid. "Charge," he ordered. "Close the distance and use your claws." The surviving ran toward the human positions. They were fast, faster than any Earth creature. They would tear the humans apart in close combat. This was what they were born for. They reached the human lines, and then the humans stood up to meet them. Skidded to a stop. The creatures before him were not the soft, weak beings from the reports. They were covered head to toe in metal armor. Their faces were hidden behind dark masks. In their hands they held weapons that glowed with strange light. The walking nightmares. The first armored human stepped forward and grabbed a soldier by the throat. With one hand, it lifted the 8-foot warrior off the ground. With the other hand, it drove a blade through the warrior's shell like it was paper. Al watched in horror as the armored humans waded into his forces. They moved with impossible speed and strength. They shrugged off claw strikes that should have torn them apart. They fought with a brutality that shocked even the... One human was stabbed through the shoulder by a claw. It did not fall. It did not scream. It looked down at the claw in its body, then looked up at the who had stabbed it. And it smiled. They could see the smile through the dark mask. It was the most terrifying thing any of them had ever witnessed. "It's smiling at me," one soldier reported through the communication system. "I've stabbed it 3 times and it's still smiling." The transmission cut off. Ran. The great ambassador, the proud warrior, ran like a frightened animal. Behind him, his soldiers were being torn apart by creatures who refused to die. Creatures who seemed to enjoy the violence. In orbit, watched the battle through remote cameras. He could not believe what he was seeing. "What are those things?" he demanded. "They are humans, Commander," his tactical officer replied. "Just humans in armor." "That is not possible. Humans are weak," the reports said. "The reports were wrong, Commander." On the ground, the battle was already over. 5,000 warriors had landed. Fewer than 200 managed to retreat to the ships. The rest were dead or dying. But the humans were not finished. "Commander," the tactical officer's voice was high with panic. "The humans are launching boarding pods." "What?" Small objects were rising from the planet's surface, heading toward the fleet. They were not missiles. They were pressurized tubes filled with human soldiers. They were aiming directly at the ships. "They're trying to board us," could not understand. "The vacuum of space would kill them." "They're wearing suits, Commander, and they're carrying their projectile weapons." The first boarding pod struck the ships. Humans in space suits cut through the hulls with plasma torches, then poured inside. They brought their guns with them. They used plasma weapons. These were powerful but slow. They needed time to charge between shots. They made bright flashes that revealed the shooter's position. Human guns could fire 12 rounds per second. They needed no charging, and in the close corridors of a spaceship, they were devastatingly effective. Warriors fell by the hundreds. They tried to fight back, but the humans were faster, more aggressive, more willing to take risks. When it killed a human, 3 more would appear to take its place. When a human was wounded, it kept fighting until it could not move. Watched his fleet die around him. Ship after ship fell silent as the humans took control. His mighty armada, which had conquered 17 worlds, was being destroyed by creatures who had never left their own planet before. "Commander," his tactical officer said quietly, "the humans have reached our outer corridors." Could hear them now, the sound of gunfire, the screams of his soldiers, the heavy footsteps of the armored walking nightmares. He finally understood what the humans were. They were not weak, they were not primitive, they were something far worse. Humans were a species that had spent their entire history fighting. They had fought predators larger than themselves. They had fought each other in wars that killed millions. They had developed weapons that could destroy their own planet, and they had survived all of it. They were not prey. They were the ultimate predators, and they had been waiting for a real challenge. The doors to the bridge exploded inward. Human soldiers poured through, their guns blazing. Officers fell around, their shells shattering under the rain of bullets. One armored human walked toward the High Commander. It was smaller than him, weaker looking even in its metal suit. But its eyes, visible through the mask, were cold and hard. "High Commander," the human said. Its voice was translated through a speaker. "You are now a prisoner of the United Earth Forces. Your war is over." Looked at the creature before him. He looked at the bodies of his officers. He looked at the screens showing his burning fleet. "How," he whispered, "how did you do this?" The human reached up and removed its helmet. It was the female from the video messages. "General." "You gave us 30 days, she said. "That was more than enough." She smiled at him. It was the same smile her soldiers wore, the smile that had terrified his warriors. "We've been preparing for war our entire existence," continued. "We just didn't know it until you showed up. So thank you, High Commander. Thank you for giving us a reason to finally work together." Said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The Great Dominion, which had never known defeat, had announced battle against the wrong species, and they had learned the truth too late. Humans were not victims, they were survivors, and they would never ever give up. The surrender was signed on the bridge of the captured Eternal Conquest. Generals sat on one side of the table. High Commander sat on the other. Between them lay a simple document that would change the galaxy forever. Its magnificent black shell was cracked in several places. One of his 4 arms hung useless at his side. His red eyes, which had once burned with pride and power, were now dull with defeat. Around the table stood human soldiers in their walking nightmare armor. They had removed their helmets and their faces were tired but proud. Behind them, through the windows, the remains of the fleet drifted in space. Of 427 warships, fewer than 100 remained intact. All of them now belonged to humanity. "Before I sign this," said slowly, "I must understand something. How did you do this? Our intelligence said you were weak. Our scouts reported that you were primitive. Everything we knew about you was wrong." Leaned back in her chair. Despite the victory, she did not look happy. She looked like someone who had survived a storm and was still counting the damage. "Your scouts watched us for 3 days, she said. 3 days during our Olympic Games, a celebration of peace and athletic competition. Yes, we saw you running and jumping and throwing things. We thought these were your greatest physical achievements. Those were games, entertainment. We do those things for fun." Process this information. His species did not have games. They did not understand the concept of doing difficult things for enjoyment. "Then what are your greatest achievements?" he asked. Was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was serious. "We split the atom. We discovered a source of power so strong that it could light cities for 100 years. And then we put that power into weapons. We built bombs that could destroy everything within 50 kilometers. We pointed those bombs at each other for decades. Felt his remaining arms tremble. You created weapons that could destroy your own species, and you pointed them at yourselves. We did. We lived with the possibility of complete destruction every single day. We grew up knowing that at any moment everything could end. It made us creative. That is insane. Yes, nodded. It probably is. But it also meant that when you arrived, we already knew how to face death. We had been practicing for 80 years. She reached across the table and pushed the surrender document toward him. Sign it, High Commander. The war is over. Your species will not be harmed, but you will leave this solar system and never return. Picked up the writing tool. His claw trembled as he made his mark on the paper. With that simple act, the Great Dominion admitted its first defeat. What will happen now? He asked. Now we talk. Your empire has conquered 17 worlds. Those worlds are now free. You will help them rebuild. You will share your technology with everyone, including us. And if we refuse? Smiled. It was not a threatening smile, but it was not a kind one either. Then we will come to your, and we will have this conversation again. But next time, I don't think you'll be in any condition to sign anything. Believed her. He had seen what humans could do when they were motivated. He did not want to see what they could do when they were truly angry. 3 months later, Earth submitted its membership application to the galactic community. This was a council of advanced species that governed trade and diplomacy across thousands of star systems. They had watched the conflict with great interest. Most of them had expected humanity to be easily conquered. Some had already planned to claim Earth's resources after they were finished. Instead, they watched a species they had dismissed as primitive destroy one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. The application arrived with a simple message attached. We come in peace. We would prefer to keep it that way. Please do not make us demonstrate the alternative. The Galactic Council debated for exactly 1 hour before accepting Earth's application. 17 species who had been considering their own invasions of Earth quietly deleted their plans. Several ambassadors requested transfers to different sectors of the galaxy, as far from Earth as possible. Only the ambassador, a new one named Al, seemed pleased by Earth's acceptance. You are happy about this? Asked the representative of a species of large lizards who had been eyeing Earth's oceans. They destroyed your fleet. They humiliated your empire. Yes, Al replied, and that is exactly why I am happy. The humans are now our allies instead of our enemies. Why would they ally with you? You tried to eat them. Al made the clicking sound that was laughter. Because they are practical creatures. They understand that former enemies can become loyal friends, and because they want us between them and whatever else might come from the deeper galaxy. The thought about this, they are using you as a shield. They are using us as a partner. We have the ships and the knowledge of the galaxy. They have, Al paused. They have the willingness to do whatever is necessary. Combined, we are stronger than either would be alone. This was the new reality of the galaxy. Earth and the Dominion had formed an alliance that confused everyone. The conquerors and the conquered working together. It should not have made sense. But it did make sense if you understood humans. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The factories that had produced weapons went back to producing cars and phones and cat toys. The soldiers returned home to their families. The walking nightmare armor was put into storage, waiting for the next time it might be needed. General retired 6 months after the war ended. She spent her days in a small house by the ocean, reading books and watching the waves. Sometimes, former soldiers would visit her. Sometimes, diplomats would come to pay their respects. One day, himself came to visit. He was no longer High Commander. That title had been taken from him after the defeat, but he was still alive, which was more than many of his soldiers could say. He found sitting on her porch, drinking something brown and hot. General, he said, I have traveled far to ask you one question. Ask. When we first came to your world, you were afraid. I could see it in your eyes at the United Nations. But then you stopped being afraid and you started to fight. What changed? Sipped her drink and looked at the ocean. Nothing changed, she said finally. I was afraid the whole time. Every single day, every single battle, I was terrified that we would lose, that our species would be enslaved or destroyed. But you fought anyway. Yes. Why? Turned to look at him. Her eyes were old and tired, but there was still something hard in them, something unbreakable. Because that's what humans do, she said. We feel fear and we fight anyway. We face impossible situations and we refuse to give up. We look at the darkness and the monsters and the end of everything and we say, no, not today. She smiled at him, and this time it was a real smile, warm and human. That's the thing about us. We're not brave because we don't feel fear. We're brave because we feel it and keep going anyway. Sat down next to her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just watched the waves and thought about the strange path that had brought them to this moment. Finally, made a soft clicking sound. I think, he said slowly, that my species chose very poorly when we decided to invade Earth. Laughed. It was the first time she had truly laughed since the war began. Yes, she agreed, you really, really did. And somewhere in the galaxy, new species heard the story of Earth. They heard about the soft creatures who had defeated the. They heard about the nuclear weapons and the walking nightmares. They heard about humans who smiled while being stabbed, who never gave up, who faced death with a joke and a middle finger raised to the universe. And they made a collective decision. Whatever happened, whatever opportunities arose, whatever temptations appeared, they would never, ever announce battle against humanity. Some species, they learned, were simply not meant to be conquered. Some species were meant to do the conquering. And humans, it turned out, were the most terrifying example of all.